our science and engineering track presentation, and thank you for being here. Our topic will focus on models and future climate scenarios to track species distributions under climate change in Appalachia. We are joined by Dr. Mona Papes, an associate professor in ecology and evolutionary biology, EEB at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Her research uses ecological niche modeling, GIS mapping technology, and remote sensing to investigate species distributions. Her research interests span macroecology, conservation biology, and evolutionary biology. Current projects include use of terrestrial LiDAR to characterize vegetation and fire effects on understory plant communities in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, as well as species shifts in future climate scenarios. She's also the director of Spatial Analysis Lab at the National Institute of Mathematical and Biological Synthesis, NIMBIOS for short. This facility is a partnership between ecology and evolutionary biology, geography, and NIMBIOS. The goal is to provide a collaborative space for researchers interested in spatial analysis. The lab includes equipment for data collection and data analysis and visualization. It specializes in the areas of biodiversity, disease ecology, and human-environment interface. This study analyzed possible effects of future climate change scenarios on the distribution of species and conservation concerns in Appalachia. So with that, Mona, the floor is yours. We're really honored to have you with us to lead us through this learning opportunity.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here. One favor I have to ask is to allow me to share a screen. So I'm logged in twice. I apologize. You have to find me twice and allow me to share screen. See if we can find me. Okay. Yes, it's working now. So I'm gonna share my screen and start the presentation. Okay, it's a bit slow, but it's going. Thank you again. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here, and I want to acknowledge my co-authors on this research. My colleagues from University of Tennessee, also in the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology, so Paul Arnsworth and Singli Guillaume. And then Ganping Zhu was our postdoc up until early this year, and he is now at Washington State University, continuing with another postdoc. So all of us work on this project, and I have the pleasure of presenting this project to you. So why are we focusing on the Appalachian region? We are focusing on the Appalachian region, first of all, because we are at the University of Tennessee, but also because we are building on previous research on the importance of this region, this ecoregion, in migration of refugia for species in eastern United States. So what I'm showing you here is a map with a zoom-in picture of our region. And so this map shows the projected migration routes for species that will have to track climate change. As climate changes, these models show the paths that species will take in their attempt to follow the suitable climate. So what we see is that there is a corridor of movement possible movement for vertebrate species in this region. So this region is important now in terms of biodiversity, but will continue to be important, especially for species that will, we are expecting will try to track the change in climate, and this will be a corridor because the conditions will be relatively stable for some species. I shouldn't say stable, but would be suitable. The change in climate will be suitable for a host of species. So first, models are showing that the Appalachian region is a corridor of movement for vertebrate species in the face of climate change. Also, another reason why we are focusing on Appalachian region is that this region is one of the high concentration regions of wildland urban interface. This has been shown by another research group from University of Wisconsin. So the map that I'm showing you is from their publication, and the orange and yellow areas represent pixels or cells in geography, where the development is at the interface or intermixed, depending on the color, with wildland or not so developed land. And the rest, the green, is vegetated land, less developed land. So if we zoom into our region, what we see is that we have a large area of intermix and interface, so housing and wildland areas intermixing at the edge of course, Smoky Mountains, Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So the big green area represents the Smoky Mountains National Park. So we have wildland, but it is at the interface with human development. So it is an important region for movement of species, survival of species, but also it is important for us humans. We are occupying this area as well, and in this wildland urban interface, not fully urban. So so related to this wildland urban interface, why this region is important, this region has shown a great increase in this wildland urban interface. So more development has happened at the edge of wildland areas. So the map on the right side shows a change in or growth in wildland urban interface area in 20 years, from 1990 to 2010. So we have several reasons why we are focusing in the Appalachian region. Specifically in this study, we wanted to evaluate the uncertainties associated with species distributions that could be incorporated in conservation programs. And in this particular study, we are we are focusing only on distributional shifts. And at the end of the presentation, I will explain where we are going with this research, what's coming up. Okay, so just a quick, I think many of you and many of us have different definitions of what is Appalachia or Appalachian region. So for the purpose of the study, we defined we use the delineation or the limits of the Appalachian region as defined by Environmental Protection Agency. So Environmental Protection Agency has created maps of ecoregions, and what you see in yellow, the outline in yellow, is the representation of Appalachian ecoregion in this Environmental Protection Agency mapping system. Okay, so I mentioned that we were interested in understanding or incorporating uncertainty related to species distributions in the future in conservation planning. So we focused on species of conservation concern, and we compiled a list of vertebrate species of conservation concern based on 3 sources. So first, the Endangered Species Act. So federally listed species, we included all those species in our study. We then, at the state level, we compiled the state wildlife action plans. So each state has its own wildlife action plan that identifies conservation priorities. And then we also used a regional entity, the Appalachian Landscape Conservation Cooperative, specifically their list of species that are primarily occurring in the Appalachian region. And by primarily, I mean the known distribution of the species. About 75% or more of the known distribution of a species is found within the Appalachian region. So this means that we focused on species that primarily occur in this region, species that are considered of conservation interest at the state level, and species that are listed, federally listed under the Endangered Species Act. So these are the most important species of conservation focus. So how did we estimate distributional shifts? We use ecological niche models. We use current and future climatic conditions. And we made two assumptions. I'll talk at the end a little bit. We made two assumptions about the species that we analyzed in terms of their movement. So we analyzed the model outputs, the niche models, based on two scenarios. One in which the species cannot disperse at all, so they cannot, where they are found now, that's where they are going to stay. And then a full dispersal scenario, meaning that a species is found in Smoky Mountains National Park now and is capable of dispersing or moving, traveling all the way to the next area that becomes suitable under future climate change. And I'll talk about these scenarios. They influence have quite a big influence in our predictions. Okay, so I mentioned that we used ecological niche models, current climatic conditions, and then future climatic conditions. So I just wanted to very briefly as possible, in one slide, explain where these climatic conditions are coming from, future climatic conditions. Where do we ecologists get these predictions or projections of what the temperature and precipitation will be like in 2050, for example. So it starts with, this is from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC report. And so these the beginning of trying to predict future climatic conditions are these models that include emissions and socioeconomic scenarios. So at the base or embedded in these future projections of climatic conditions are predictions or scenarios of socioeconomic development. And there are physical models of climate, atmospheric conditions, cycling, so on and so forth. So it starts with the society and how the different scenarios of societal development and economical development, and how those could influence the amount of emissions in the future. And of course, those emissions then create those radiative forcing levels, meaning that the sun, the energy from the sun cannot escape back in the atmosphere. So the Earth basically warms up. So based on those, but climatologists create these representative concentration pathways and levels of radiative force. Okay, so based on these scenarios, there are four. The IPCC the panel has generated 4 possible emission scenarios. So what you see in the graph are the 4 possible scenarios. So if I'm realizing now that the text is quite small. So there is a red line that keeps going up. That's the RCP 8.5. So that is the emission scenario that assumes that nothing will change in the society and will keep emitting the same amount of greenhouse gases. Then there are two middle level, the orange and the blue, light blue, and then there is a low emission scenario, the dark blue, that shows a decrease in the emission, greenhouse gas emissions. So we focused on two of those. We focused on the 8.5, so the highest one, the red one, and then we also included in our models the middle one, the 4.5, so the light blue line that shows a decrease in emission scenario. So basically we have the worst case scenario in red in terms of emissions, and then we have the light blue, which is a good scenario in which we are able to reduce the amount of emissions by 2050 and continue to reduce. Okay, so these emission scenarios then go, these representative concentration pathways go into more modeling, including an Earth system model, and then finally, at the end of all this modeling, we have these climate projections, these maps of precipitation and temperature in the future. Again, projected, estimated, not measured. So we, ecologists, take those climate projections and use them in our ecological niche models. And Earth systems is another very complex box. I have a pop-up blue box there to show you that basically the Earth is divided in 100-kilometer boxes or columns, I should say, because they are three-dimensional. And the models are estimating the circulation of gases and atmosphere and heating of the atmosphere in those 100-kilometer boxes. So they are quite coarse when it comes to the spatial resolution, the representation on Earth. Okay, so that was as quick as I could. A brief introduction of where these future climate conditions are coming from. But back to what I actually do, what I actually study. So for ecological niche modeling, we need a knowledge of where the species of interest are found. So we start with a map of known presence records. So I have the known presence records for a salamander, and you see all those triangles, those little triangles represent places where someone observed the species, and now that record is in an online database. So we need to know where the species are found usually. Then we correlate where species are found with climatic conditions at those locations. So for that we use digital maps of degree days below freezing, mean annual temperature, winter mean temperature, evaporation. I'm just showing four. We use about 27 variables. So this model allows us to estimate what climatic conditions are associated with species presence. And then we map those conditions associated with species presence, and we create a potential distribution for that species. So what you see, the last map, presence data and climatic maps go into this algorithm, and then out comes this potential distribution map. So what you see are basically areas that are dark green that are likely to be suitable for the species based on known presences of the species. So you see that a lot of the dark green area overlaps with known records, those yellow triangles. Okay, so then we do this for every species, and we generate, like I said, a model of the climatic suitability for the species, or what climatic conditions are allowing the species to survive. And then we take those climatic conditions and that combination of climatic conditions that are associated with presence, and we project those on those future climate data that we get from other models that we don't do. So in our study here, we included 6 global circulation models. These are going into that box of Earth system models. So there are various scenarios of future climate conditions based on those Earth models, Earth system models. And then we use 2 emission scenarios, those representative concentration pathways, RCPs. And then we use 2 time periods, 2050 and 2080. So remember, we are interested in the uncertainty related to future distribution of these species. So that's why we are including various circulation models, 2 emission scenarios to get at that uncertainty and variation across possible future climate conditions. And then what we get is a future potential distribution, and I'm showing you in this case for one species, the future potential distribution of the species in 2050 under that moderate emission scenario of RCP 4.5. And then what we do is we calculate the distributional shifts. So how much will the distribution of the species change in the future relative to current potential distribution. So on the left side, we have the current potential distribution for the species. So where the climatic conditions are suitable for the species. You see it's a broad geographic range across 4 states almost. And then when we project the conditions to future, unfortunately for this particular species, there's a drastic reduction in the suitable areas, climatically suitable areas in this region. So there could be a shift or simply dramatic reduction in the range. So we did this for many species, for 270 species. So we included amphibian, birds, mammals, and reptiles of conservation concern. And then we averaged, we had distributions per global circulation model conditions, and then we averaged for all those 6 global circulation models that we are using. So now we see the same species, the average potential distribution, so we are including more uncertainty, we are accounting for the uncertainty across models. So we now have the average potential distribution in the future for this species using 6 different global circulation models. So if you compare left with right, you see that 1 GCM shows dramatic reduction, but an average of 6 GCMs shows that there might be more areas that are suitable for the species, which is why it's important to include more global circulation models. Okay, so finally what we did is we looked at individual species, but we also looked at total number of species. So we summed all these maps and we calculated species richness, or number of species in each cell. So for 270 species, we summed 270 maps, and then we did the same thing for future, for the average 6 global circulation models. And so what you see is present at the top and future at the bottom, and the colors show number of species or species count in each cell. So what you see is that, for example, in this, between these 2 maps, there is a shift in the areas that have lower count, species count, from central north to more to the eastern part. So the blue areas show lower species count, and you see that the lower species count changes between present and future, as well as high species count, over 160 species. The dark red, those areas of dark red change between present, or the location changes between present and future. Okay, so basically we can do a difference. We can calculate species gain and loss by subtracting future from present. So the map on the right side, the purple colors and dark purple colors show areas that will gain species versus areas that will lose species. So you see there are plenty of pixels at the edge between dark purple and reddish. So those areas will not see a change in number of species, but then the dark colors will lose up to 30 species. So that's, you know, areas to focus in terms of where species are which areas are becoming suitable for more species versus which areas will become less suitable for species. Okay, so that was the total for 270 species, 270 maps put together, but we can also look at taxonomic groups. So we start with amphibians, and then I'll show you reptiles, birds, and mammals. Again, this is for 2050 using the moderate emission scenarios, that representative concentration pathway 4.5. So this is not worst case scenario. This is a moderate scenario where the world does something about the emission scenarios, does something meaning controls and lowers the amount of greenhouse gases. And so this is the future with some control and some lowering of the amount of greenhouse gases that we are currently outputting in the atmosphere. And also assuming that species can move anywhere and can, fly, can crawl, can run kilometers to hundreds of kilometers. So full dispersal scenario. So this is for the amphibians. Then we have reptiles, and we have present, future, and then the difference between present and future. We have birds, and then finally mammals. So again, where we see areas in at the bottom of the map, bottom of the figure here, where we see dark colors, that's where the number of species will decrease. And where we see light colors, red or light colors, that's where those are the areas that will see an increase in number of species. So,
excuse me, Mona.
Yes.
Just have a minute or so left. If we could kind of wrap it up, and we have one question.
Okay, sounds good. So we see differences across these taxonomic groups. Okay, so that means that we will have to focus regionally. Our conservation plans will have to focus regionally, and we'll have to focus on subsets of species, because we see this variation across regions and across groups of species that we are interested in. Like I said, we assume that that species can go anywhere, can travel, unlimited distances, and we did not include land use or species interactions in our models. So there are big limitations here. Basically, our study is very optimistic because it assumes species can go anywhere. It assumes land use doesn't have any effect on them, and species interactions don't have effects. But what we are trying to do is, next step are include land use change scenarios, and also include some economic benefit from land use change, so that we can incorporate more uncertainties in these conservation planning strategies that we are trying to inform. Thank you. I apologize. I don't have time for questions, but if there is one or two questions that I'm allowed to answer, I'm happy to answer.
I don't think that we have time for questions, and there wasn't too many, and there was a few compliments.
Okay.
So, thank you, Mona, for this inspiring work and presentation, and thank you, our audience, for being with us today.